Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. Please keep your cameras off and your microphones off for the duration of the event. They're off by design. And I'm going to keep talking while I admit people from the waiting room. So don't get annoyed if I'm scatterbrained here. Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Kerry. I am a member of the Anderson's events team. And before we get started, I just want to take a quick second to welcome you and thank you for being here. The Anderson family has been selling books independently since 1875, believe it or not, which means we have survived a lot of things, including past pandemics. But this year, 2020, has been terrible for us and for every small business out there. And it's for that reason that your support of this event tonight and your ticket purchase, your purchase of the book, they're personal to us. It's more than just gratitude. It's a personal thank you to you. We greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be with us tonight. And we just continue to have amazing amounts of gratitude for everybody who supports us during this insane year. A few things about tonight. Cameras and mics will remain off, as I mentioned. There will be a Q&A period after the authors are done speaking, and you guys can submit questions for that Q&A through the event chat. And I encourage you to just submit them as you think of them, because I will be actually compiling them and I'll jump back on when the authors are done speaking and I will feed those questions to them. So I'll be going through them, compiling a few, picking some. So as you think of them, put them in, because it actually helps me be able to prepare them for after we're ready for that. I can't think of anything. Oh, yes. And then, of course, your books. If you're wondering when you can pick up your book at Anderson's, some of you picked to have them shipped, of course, and those will ship out hopefully tomorrow afternoon, if not the next day. And then we always say they're ready to pick up usually by the afternoon after the event. The next day if you're picking them up in our store. So I just want to give you guys the update. You will get an email, I believe, when they're ready. So, but enough from me, I know. Let's move in to why we're all here tonight. Of course, we are here tonight, this is very exciting, with Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, who is a distinguished university professor at Vanderbilt University. He is widely considered one of America's premier public intellectuals, and he is the author of 7, soon to be 8, New York Times bestsellers. A contributing opinion writer for the New York Times, Dr. Dyson is a recipient of 2 NAACP Image Awards and the 2020 Langston Hughes Festival Medallion. And he will be in conversation tonight with Dr. Professor Jelani Cobb, a staff writer at The New Yorker. He writes frequently about race, politics, history, and culture, and he is an award-winning author, and he teaches at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. So welcome, gentlemen. I am going to turn my camera off and hand it over to you now. And I'm just encouraging everybody to get those questions into me while they're speaking. All right? Okay, enjoy. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. So, Brother Dyson, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, Brother Cobb. Not only did she mention, I can't remember, New Yorker, this dude is famous for writing in the New Yorker. I just want to tell people, I know y'all already know that, but we got to show love when we have a real New Yorker writer sitting up in here.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for hanging out with me, man.
It's funny, because the last time I saw you was in a radically different environment, but it was within this same year. Like usually you think of change happening over the course of a long period of time.
That's true.
The last time I saw you was at the Jay-Z event at Columbia.
Right.
You were in an auditorium, which sounds unbelievable right now, but we were in an auditorium with maybe 400 people.
Right.
Who were all there to see, Jay-Z for the launch of the Sean Carter lecture series at Columbia. After the conversation ended, a group of young people just mobbed Jay-Z, surrounding him. Like they were all kind of in his personal space. And I remember marveling at that in a time where there was no pandemic, or we were just kind of vaguely hearing about this thing called COVID. And now, we wouldn't let anyone get within 20 feet of us.
It ain't happening.
It's such a different world.
It ain't happening. No, you're absolutely right. It is astonishing. And you did a hell of a job that night. I mean, for y'all who are listening, Professor Cobb was extremely modest because you did a hell of a job of guiding him through a conversation where he was really thoughtful and reflective and gave some very smart answers. I think that blew a lot of people's minds to know he was that smart.
Yeah.
But it's also what he's playing off of and the questions that you were raising. So, and providing to him in the context. It was a beautiful give and take, man.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So, I mean, I bring that up in the course of this conversation to say that a lot of the book that we're here to talk about is context.
Right.
That we're looking at, the moment of this year and all that's happened within it. And so I wonder if you could just take us back to the beginning, like how the book was conceived and what you were hoping for in this specific time period as it was going to be delivered.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Like most of us, when we were watching in May, the events unfold of George Floyd's death on that memorable, unforgettable day, May 25th, preceded by, we didn't know until later the next day, Amy Cooper and Chris Cooper in your neck of the woods there in Central Park, where an ornithologist, amateur bird watcher and Harvard graduate, right? He threw a curve for a brother on the sister. And his pedigree, right, is not usually the presumption, given the prejudices and the stereotypes of who Black men are, that he would be that kind of guy, asking Miss Cooper to leash her dog up, and she got mad because he flipped the tables on her. Usually it's the Karens who are asking Black men and Black women to stay in their lanes and to do what's appropriate. And here is a man flipping the table on her by asking her that. So we saw all of that going on, and George Floyd dying beneath the knee of an out-of-control officer, Derek Chauvin, now former policeman, who depressed this man's mortally bruised column so much that he asphyxiated him and he was dead. And when I saw that, like so many others, we were at home, many of us, because those of us who have the leisure and the privilege to be at home, enough bandwidth on our...
Can I jump in real quick?
Right.
When you first saw this, did you watch it?
I did. I mean, because something said to me, oh my God, here it is. Here we go again. There was something, it was a hesitancy now. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, do I really want to do this? Because so many of them I've skipped and I've waited till later. And I said, let me see the description. But for some reason that night, I mean, when it came across and people were, I was like, what? Like, not, the reason I watched it, because I couldn't believe it.
Right.
I'm thinking, Eric Garner, I know, like if you're both a victim, but especially if you're a cop, then hey, let's not be on the tape being the cop who killed Eric Garner. We don't want to do that. We've seen that movie literally before. So we're not going to make that mistake. So I was dumb. I was like, it can't be right. It can't be real. And then when I watched the thing, I was astonished. And it was even more brutal, isn't it? There's something more brutal even about his death, right? Because with Eric Garner, a substantial man pulled down by several cops, and you see his tumbling and begging to breathe. That's barbaric enough. But the barbarism was exponentially increased by the calmness and the casualness of Derek Chauvin with his hand in his pocket, breath by breath, killing a man who begged for minutes to be relieved. And I think that was astonishing to me.
Sadism.
It is. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And when I saw that, it blew my mind. And I said, what can I do? You're a writer. I got to write. I got to do something, because I can't go out there and throw bombs. I can't, firebomb the police department and say you just horrible and corrupt, metaphorically. I can't be there physically right now. So I got to, and COVID, you're talking about what they said in the 90s, about the convergence of these pandemics. We got the COVID-19 and COVID 16, 19 coming together. And so I couldn't go there. We couldn't be there. And so I had to write. So I started writing. I mean, Ahmaud Arbery started me off. I was thinking about that, but the real instigation here for this book is the death of George Floyd and trying to put it in context, as you say, put it in context. White theft, what Black death, the hurt and pain that have been imposed on Black people, and the refusal to acknowledge our humanity. I want to put all that stuff on paper and figure out how to talk about it to the people who would read it.
Mm-hmm. So just going, from the title, this long time coming.
Right.
But what made this moment happen now?
Right. I think the convergence of those pandemics was especially powerful because think about it. If white brothers and sisters are at home, along with everybody else, but I'm talking about white people now, and they go like, well wait, Black people have been telling the truth, right? I mean, I know we heard that. We're trying to process it. But dude is on the ground and he ain't hurt nobody. He's calling for his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And
who is deceased.
Dude just died. And he tells the cops, I just lost my mother. And they pay no attention to him, man. None. And so white people, and I mean everybody, but I'm saying because of white people got in the streets, and I want to lead the story up to that. White people looking at that going like, come on. Like seriously. Like the dude is harmless. He's prostrate on the ground, crying for his mother. And notice, and you would notice this because you are a sharp-eyed, writer and observer of human nature, that he's being so respectful. Right, talking about respectability. He's calling him officer. And please, what did I do? It's extraordinary that he could be that way under those conditions. So if a man's character, in this case, a man and his character are shown in times of stress, whatever you say about the guy and whatever later on they revealed he would have trouble with the law, the character of this man was pretty remarkable. And right. So I think a lot of white people saw it like he's being nice, he's being respectful, he's begging, he ain't being nasty, he ain't cussing them out. And they're still killing him. And I think that blew a lot of white people's minds to say, wait a minute, we've literally seen this movie before. This guy is looking into the camera, as you said, casual sadism, cold-hearted and cold-blooded. And not only that, the Black guy who's on his back and the white cop who's on his knees and the Asian cop who's on the lookout. And I tell people, just because you're multicultural, just because you're diverse doesn't mean you're equitable, doesn't mean you're just. That was multiculturalism. 2 white cops, a Black cop, and an Asian cop. And together they conspired to kill a Black man. And the point is, that's why I say diversity alone ain't gonna never cut it. Because you can be diverse toward an unjust end. And in this case, the unjust end was the end of this man's life. So why now? People are at home, the pandemic is real. There's a sort of empathy, even though there's some callousness, there's an empathy for Black people. We're already disproportionately impacted by, and Latinx people too, by COVID. People had a baseline of empathy and understanding. Okay, they're suffering from that. And then a lot of white brothers and sisters like, well, damn, we got the COVID thing going on and you can't even suspend killing Black people like right now. I think it really shook them up. Mm-hmm. Stuff that for us is like, of course they weren't going to do it. Of course they ain't going to give no break to no brother during pandemic. And I think that pushed a lot of white people into the streets, and it pushed a real reckoning, at least the promise of it, that hadn't been present in a whole bunch of years.
I think it's really interesting to me that, I just want to talk about this and we can move, further onto some of the other topics you cover. But this is so central that I think, what was interesting to me about that moment was that it seemed like there was a stark divide. Mm-hmm. There were people who knew that this was a country where something like that could happen.
Right. And
people who were newly aware that this was a country where something like that could happen.
That's a great point.
And that divide was largely racial.
It was primarily racial. Mm-hmm. And because Black people, unfortunately, and real, I mean, Latinx people, a lot of people of color, but yeah, that's kind of what we've been saying. That's what we know. And it's not a yawn because it was still barbarism, but it wasn't surprising mm-hmm. to us that even during a pandemic, that police will police, cops mm-hmm. will cop. Mm-hmm. But for many white brothers and sisters and others, they were like, that can't be real. That doesn't happen. Yeah. What do you think we've been saying? Yes, it does. And it continues to happen. And I think that was an awakening. That's why, it's like somebody who's a new convert You know, they love Jesus and they want to serve God and they want to no drink wine and can't dance no more and can't go to the club. You know, like you make another Christian go like, hey, I've been in a minute. Stop with all that now.
Right.
You messing up my vibe, son, because I've been in the club Saturday night. I'm in church Sunday morning. I done worked out my relationship between the sacred and the secular. But the new convert is like, oh, my Lord, no, it's all great. So, and thank God for white folk who like got woke and they were like, sit like, what?
Right.
Like, well, what do you mean? Like, we were like,
I knew something was up when I saw people burning cop cars in Salt Lake City.
right.
Like, I was in Salt Lake City maybe a little bit over a year ago for a talk. I met all the Black people in Salt Lake City. So it was not us there. So,
right. Come on, Portland. Ain't no brothers. Ain't no sisters. That's right. And white folk were like serious about it. Oh, no. Oh, no, you go. Well, no, we're going to handle this situation. I mean, and I had to say amen. But so you can never determine when a person's wokeness. Again, I'm sorry, being an old Baptist preacher, and I appreciate your refined skepticism and outright repudiation of many of the traditions that I would agree with you about, by the way. So anyway, so you know, you think about the fact that you know, when did you get yours? On a Monday morning at 7 a.m. When you get your 7 o'clock on Tuesday night? I got saved. The Holy Spirit came. So when did you get woke? Hey, folks, it was May 25th, May 26th. When I saw that thing, they got religion, man, and they were awakened. And you can never determine when somebody's wokeness comes. You can't determine when they get awakened. When, aha, I get it. That eureka moment. I think I found it. I understand. You know, and we can say, oh, you didn't get the message in slavery and Jim Crow, and you didn't get it in the civil rights movement and the Black Power struggle and okay, but you got it now. So you got it, let's run with it. And I think a lot of white brothers and sisters hit those streets. That's why it was the biggest protest in the history of this nation, because white folk finally said enough is enough and hit those streets. The question is, can we transform that into something that will be longer lasting and more systemic? Because for me, I don't know about you, it was pretty remarkable that we were talking about systemic racism like we were talking about breathing. Like we go from nothing to systemic racism, man.
It was being covered in a way that I think was interesting, that, you know, it was being covered like the economy or covered like the GDP.
Right.
You know, like the kind of things that, you know, are just a kind of given. Like, of course, we're going to talk about this.
Exactly.
The question of being systemic racism. And so I wondered, you know, if we could branch out and say, how does Breonna Taylor's death, you know, factor into this moment and into this book?
Yeah. Well, one of the letters, and for those who may not know, this book is basically written as a series of letters to Black martyrs.
Actually, before we go to that, look, let's put that question on pause. It's like, what made you decide to go with the epistolary form? That was one of the first questions I had for you.
Because I envisioned myself being interviewed by you, and I wanted to hear you with your clear diction go epistolary. That's beautiful. It's worth it all right there. But, you know, I wanted, you know, I felt that I wanted to talk to them, not about them. I didn't want to objectify them. I didn't want to put them out there at a distance from me. I wanted to have an intimacy, a brutal intimacy with the gone, the recently arrived ancestors, with the exception of, you know, Emmett Till. Most everybody else, Elijah McClain, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, right, all those, right? So, and I wanted to converse with them. I wanted a different meaning than people usually talk about when they say commune with the ancestors. But I wanted to talk to them, because in talking to them, I could talk things through and try to work out in each specific case the context of their suffering, the particular circumstances of their hurt and trauma, and the degree to which their deaths had a noticeable and measurable impact on the culture in which we live. And so I want to write letters to them. And Breonna Taylor, I think, was extraordinary, because think about it. There's no camera, there's no video recording. And some could say initially that was the reason that Breonna Taylor didn't get kind of equated with the other martyrs of the movement, because there was no visual testimony. Well, to a degree that might be true, but what happens in the absence of that video was the fill-in of imagination and enough context with the facts of the case, the old school reporting where, you know, the stories came out, people's testimonies began to trickle out, the boyfriend began to talk, and then we began to picture that, no, something is really wrong here and something horrible occurred and we've got to address it. And lo and behold, with, is it the state's attorney general Cameron, who ended up being a very poor character to me, pretending to be as the, you know, amanuensis, let's put it that way, of Mitch McConnell and the stenographer for the right wing. You know,
that's about right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's tight. Look, he's tighter with Mitch McConnell's at his wedding.
Right.
He's really his mentor.
Right.
And then he says, I don't want to make this highly charged. I don't want it to be biased. Oh, so that's why you spoke, Attorney General Cameron, at the Republican National Convention? Because you wanted to maintain a veneer, a patina of neutrality? It didn't work, sir. And so I think Breonna Taylor, to answer your question more directly, conjures the limits of the law when applied to Black bodies and the absurdity, the Camus-like absurdity of holding to account a police person who shot the white neighbor's house up, apartment up, not the Black neighbors, but the white neighbor's house up. And then that would be the only criminal charge brought against a policeman. That shows the absurdity of, you know, sometimes the claims about police and the absurdity of disregarding Black life, so much so that the only person we'll hold accountable is putting a bullet in an apartment of a neighbor that could have potentially hurt them, as opposed to the real Black person that you actually murdered. And so, and killed, I would say murdered, but at least killed. So she represents the ongoing trauma of having to deal with the fact that, yes, the state finally stepped in, $12 million. And I don't know about you, Professor Cobb, but when $12 million, I said, they're not gonna hold these cops accountable.
Oh no, that's exactly what my read was. You know, I thought that the size of that settlement was meant to deter any likelihood or any possibility of there being unrest when it was announced that the cops would not be indicted. And
then there's some systemic stuff. We're gonna, you know, no-knock warrants are out. We're gonna try to address the systemic issues with policing. I was like, it ain't happening. They're about to not hold these cops accountable, and lo and behold, they didn't. So Breonna Taylor is, I think, a metaphor, is a symbol of both the intense attention that surrounds fallen Black bodies, but the frustration of not being able to bring to term, if you will, our own concern about our lives and what police people are still allowed to get away with. And I think it suggests that even when you have a Black figure in a high place present, it ain't no guarantee that justice will come. I mean, that's a lesson we already knew. That's a lesson we've learned time and again. We've got Ben Carson, and, you know, Ben Carson has sent more money back to the federal bank because he refused to use it as the HUD secretary, which is ridiculous, right? The refusal with his conservative, you know, economic principles to expend those monies to help vulnerable people, a large number of whom happen to be Black, and would rather save the money in his conservative principle than share it on the people for whom it was meant. I mean, so all of that is there. Yeah.
Yeah, in the midst of a pandemic. You know, you mentioned something that I'm curious about. And so we saw two extremes. On the one hand, there was Breonna Taylor, which was really like a Rorschach. You look at this situation, tell me what you see.
Right.
And, you know, there's no video. There's the account of her boyfriend, the account of, you know, the various police, the neighbors, but you're really piecing all of that together.
Right.
Find out what happened.
Right.
On the opposite side of it is George Floyd, and we know exactly what happened. in excruciating detail,
Right.
we know what happened. And I was wondering about that. You know, the fact that I did a documentary with Frontline, you know, Policing the Police 2020,
Right.
and it was about police reform in Newark. We started out with the footage from George Floyd, and I said, you know, to the director, I was like, look, we can't show it. You know, we can't show it. And so what we did was that we showed Derek Chauvin's knee, we showed his face, we showed his body. We never showed George Floyd on that ground.
Amazing.
But I thought about this. So, like, is the cause of Black humanity, because we don't see white people suffer in that way.
Right.
When they have the ISIS videos where people are being decapitated, with you know, the death of you know, the American reporter, you know, who in the
Daniel
hands
Pearl? Yeah.
well, Daniel Pearl, but the other the photographer
Not Khashoggi. Okay.
more recently, right?
Oh,
but,
yeah, right.
But we don't show that. And you know, Susan Sontag, you know, her book about photography and suffering, you know, on the pain, regarding the pain of others, she talks about that. She says, we will show the images of mortality for people for whom we feel distant. We do not show that for people for whom we feel intimate. And so I wonder if showing that video did more to humanize or dehumanize George Floyd.
That's a great point, man. I mean, and given the Sontag, you know, push and pull of intimacy and distance, and the degree to which the photograph itself, and I meditate a bit about photographs in this book, just a little bit.
Right.
And, you know, as a metaphor for, you know, the negatives that develop life and so on and so forth, or images of life, it's a great question, and it's a troubling question. On the one hand, the absence of the image in the case of people with power protects and preserves their humanity. Whereas the withholding of the photographic evidence in the case of Black people denies humanity to me. Because already Black people in the abstract can't be granted a sliver of humanity. Because if that were the case, then it wouldn't take the videos to prove to you that we're going through this stuff in the first place. So it's the very photographic evidence that proves that what we say is true. Because see, in our case, in the Sontagian analysis, it would be multi-evidential, as the philosophers would say. It ain't just the preservation of humanity, it's proof. It's empirical verification. We have an extra burden, and our extra burden is not just to be human, because we have to accomplish that. It ain't given to us, so we have to accomplish that. But we also have to bring the proof with us. You know, bring your own bottle, bring your own verification with you. That's not true. That's not what happened. Yes, it is. No, it didn't. You probably said something to that cop. You probably were a smart ass to that cop. No, I promise you. I really did. No. So now the visual evidence is to substantiate and redeem all of Black America, not just that individual person. Because if we can end up believing what happened to George Floyd, then we can believe what happens to Black people en masse. Not every person, but in general as a principle. So on the one hand, I understand that the dehumanization, the re-traumatizing effect of watching a visual image of decline, and in this case, of demise, is somehow enervating. It somehow saps the real energy of humanity from you. But on the other hand, it bestows a cloak of recognition of a humanity that we couldn't grant him in life. George Floyd had more love and consideration and admiration and acclaim in death than he could ever gain in life. And it was because of that video that we heard his daughter say, "My daddy changed the world." That his mural was painted the world over. And so he gained something in death that he could never gain in life. And so the photograph is the ritual brook of fire through which he must have passed in order to grant him a humanity. And here's the irony: a humanity he can't enjoy while he's alive.
That's right.
And the humanity bestowed upon him posthumously. So
the thing that you're talking about, like the contingent humanity, is one of the things I thought about in this book, right? Because, you know, there's Elijah McClain, And, you know, you talk about him, you know, his gentleness, his personality. It's like, you know, Clemente Pinckney, who, you know, for people who don't know, was the pastor of Emmanuel AME, who was killed by a white supremacist, whose name I won't repeat here.
Right, right.
Everyone who's in between there, you know, those two poles, Brianna, Eric, Ahmad, you know, the entire spectrum of them. When we look at the people, like, our instinct is to immediately humanize them, to attest to their humanity.
That's true.
And I feel like it's an interesting kind of reflex, and it's a necessary reflex.
Right.
It comes from this place that, you gotta go with me for a second. When we talk about the founding documents of this country, they enshrine freedom as a default.
Right.
The default position of a human being is freedom.
Right.
And that you can't be deprived of that freedom without due process. That's in the script. That's
right.
We cannot tamper with this. Your natural state and condition is free.
That's right. That's right.
But for Black people, we had to carry freedom papers. This thing that indicated the natural default for us was to be unfree.
That's right.
We had to have the extra document to say, we actually qualify for the thing that you get just waking up in the morning.
There it is.
It's the same dynamic. And I was thinking about this as I was reading the book. I was like, so Mike is doing this service. It's horrific that we have this tradition in the first place.
Oh, man.
That we have to do this. But it's a wonderful testament to the humanity of the people you talk about in this book.
Right.
But it's this terrible paradox that we have to have that conversation in the first place.
In the first place. That's why I wanted to begin. This is powerful what you're talking about. That's why I began with Elijah McClain. Because here is a man, a young boy, 23 years old, and arguably on the spectrum. Nobody ever, comments, but he obviously was a special child, special young man, 23 years old, anemic. That's why he had the ski mask on. Wouldn't hurt a fly, literally. Part of he was like Albert Schweitzer in blackface, in his beautiful brown skin, right? And his reverence for life was total, and it was sincere. And so here is a guy, and I'm reading what he's saying. Hey, and like George Floyd, even more so, he's almost forgiving them for their brutal treatment of him and explaining to them why they feel compelled to do it. I mean, look at the depth of psychology that we have to live with, that we have to deploy in order to just be granted space to breathe. Your point about the extra stuff we got to bring, the extra stuff we got to do just for what white brothers and sisters take for granted. We got to do all this extra stuff. So now he's got to go through this moral jujitsu, and he's got to figure it out. I don't even eat meat. Oh, not that eating meat is a problem, right? So he qualifies everything. And you know what I thought about when I read that? I said, this is writ large on this particular canvas of history, the poignancy of the respectability of politics. Because the point of respectability of politics is, hey, we're good, we're smart, don't treat us like that. And once you figure it out, you'll know that we're good, and therefore you will be convinced of our humanity. The problem with that, of course, is that you're trying to prove your humanity to people who were denied in the first place, means they're not worthy morally of receiving the knowledge of your humanity and can't grant it. I mean, that's the bitter irony of respectability of politics. You're talking to people who can't respect you because their humanity is in question, but you want them to grant yours.
But this is the thing. If I could just jump in really quickly, that line that Noam Chomsky had that I love, when Noam Chomsky said, speaking truth to power is greatly overrated. He said, for one, power is already aware of the truth. How else could they do such a good job of obfuscating it?
Right.
And so
true. It's true. Absolutely right.
We're denying your humanity
from the get-go, and you're trying to explain it to them. The very people, like they're uninterested in your humanity, right? And so look at the extent to which this young man went, and we have it on tape, so we hear it. He's saying it. These words that I recorded in my book, he said them. We literally can hear him begging for relief from their horrible lack of humanity. And he is showing every bit of it. Here's a guy who plays the violin for the pigeons and birds. And, his coworker said he walked around as if he had a gold orb, wouldn't hurt a fly. And yet he had to beg and plead for recognition. And this is not an abstract thing. So when people dismiss this, well, the quest for Black humanity and recognition in the family of in the family of races and ethnicities is something all forget. That can never be taken for granted. And what Elijah McClain is showing is that the lack of that recognition can be deadly. That's a theme I think that traces throughout this book. Ahmaud Arbery, you're an animal. There was something in the chase and the hunt of Ahmaud Arbery that is so colossally evil.
It was a safari. It was a suburban safari.
It was a safari, and he was the animal being trapped and traced. And there was a kind of bitter, ironic, vengeful joy in the pursuit of this man and recognition. I try to argue in the book, there's almost an admiration. Man, look at this animal. Look how much he can escape us. Look how he's still going after 4 or 5 minutes. That doesn't sound long, but you try to run at full speed for 4 minutes with a truck chasing you behind and one in the front, and you're stuck in between. I mean,
but that's the stuff of nightmares. That's literally the stuff of ancestral nightmares for Black people.
I mean, you ain't got to have a movie called Get Out. You're seeing it play out on your screen. And to see that. And the guy recording it, and recording it, trying to play as if he were a neutral observer, a witness. And really what you're trying to do is to mark another death, another Black body gone. And so, yeah, that pain, that trauma, that hurt is something I wanted to record in the book and to see the terrible paradox about what you speak. Why do we have to prove our humanity? Why can't we presume it? The beauty of being in Black spaces, as complicated as they are, is the presumption of Blackness as a normative existence without need of justification or self-explanation.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
That's what it is. And what other people can take for granted, we never can.
It's like speaking a native language.
There it is, And
so,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I know we've gone, kind of far afield. We have just a couple minutes before we jump into the Q&A. But I really always end with this question. You remember I ended with this question with Jay-Z.
Right.
We talked about why you did this book and some of the context and some of the content in the book. In an ideal world, what do you want a reader to take away from this project?
Yeah. I mean, speaking about your brilliant and eloquent, really, kind of demystification of a narrative intending to cloak our Black brothers and sisters in their humanity. I just want people to read this to understand, the fragility of our humanity is not a result of our internal machinations or anything that we lack or any insufficiency we have. It is the brutal negotiation with a white world that continually refuses to acknowledge us as human beings. And given your comment about freedom stitched, written, literally inscribed into a document that confers value on white life. And you juxtapose that to Roger B. Taney, 1857, that Black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. There it is. That's straight up what it is. And this book is an argument against that presupposition and the beauty of Black agency, even amidst the horrors that have been unleashed on us. Robert Frost said, freedom is moving easy in a harness. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have done that so often. And I wanted to celebrate the joy I wanted to celebrate the joy and the will to be human and to overcome any obstacle because of the presence of not just a magical or mysterious, but the presence of a real on the ground, earthy appreciation for us as a people, Black love at its best. And I wanted that love that I have, the love that Black people have, to flow through this book as I write to these martyrs in both appreciation for their extraordinary sacrifice, but also in bitter argument with a world that made that sacrifice necessary.
Mm. And I think there's this great line that I love about Joe Frazier. He talked about the third Ali Frazier fight.
Right.
And he says that, you know, in the middle rounds, you know, Frazier found his rhythm. He dug deep and went down to that place where he whistles while he works.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I thank you for whistling while you work, you know, on this project, for taking the humanity of these people for granted in a way that it was not in the course of their lives.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for joining me tonight. The reason I wanted to talk to you, because I knew you would take me where nobody else would, thinking about it, and you have done that tonight. Thank you so much, my man.
Thank you. So if we can get Kerry, hi, Kerry, and we can get questions from the attendants and participants.
Yes, we have a quiet group tonight, and I say that like it's.
Oh, listen! You got two professors here. We'll start calling on folks.
Maybe I should hire you for every single virtual event, because people are just scared. It's funny because if we were in person, of course, we would run over time with all the questions. But in virtual events, people tend to be a little quieter. We do have a question from one Marcia Dyson. I believe you know her.
Marcia Dyson.
Marcia, yeah.
Cut her off. Cut that microphone off. Cut her off right now. No.
She asked if you could speak on the compassion of the congregants of Emmanuel African Methodist Church in Charleston and the unforgiving of the cancel culture that is so prevalent in our nation right now.
Wow. I'm gonna let Jelani Cobb answer that one first.
Yeah, we talked about this though. We talked about this about the forgiveness of the people in Emmanuel AME, because if you remember, we talked. I think it was the week that happened, you know, when all sorts of things were flying around, and you know the forgiveness happened, and I said to you, I think that the nature of our history has been such that we had to learn very quickly how to metabolize hatred. How to metabolize the hatred that is thrown at you, and that was, you know, that you are forgiveness. Forgiveness is an act of self-defense, you know, and all these things that we talked about. But the problem with it is that you're quoting Shakespeare to barbarians. That the language of forgiveness, the spiritual language they were talking about, was up here.
Right.
And then that was translated from this eloquent tongue into the barbarian tongue of people who said, oh, well, no harm, no foul.
Right.
You know, they could forgive us. Whew,
right.
We could just move on.
Right.
That was where that conversation went. And I just wished, I felt myself, and I wonder what you have to say about this. I wish they had forgiven him in private. That no one else ever knew.
That's amazing, right? Because the public utility of Black forgiveness is often, if not always, counterproductive to the ends of Black existence.
Right? That's right.
I mean, because look at what happened with Botham Jean down in Dallas.
That's right.
The public forgiveness of the brother,
sure,
white woman, and look at the scandalous misapplication of our theology. And it's an erasure of the profundity. Like you said, here we are up here. I think about Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go high. Well, we're real high. There's nothing lower than killing another human being. And here we are, before the thing gets started, we're forgiving you in advance. Because as you said, an act of self-defense, we don't want to carry that bitterness and that hurt and that pain and that trauma and that obsession. What could I have done to do differently? But I think that it's an excellent juxtaposition. And I promise I didn't set Marcia Dyson up to ask that question, but I do happen to have a chapter in this book talking about cancel culture, because I just think that look, I get the point of cancel culture, because what is it concerned mostly? Sex, gender, and race. And those are the two biggest unsolved problems we have in America, right? We can't get it right. Even the courts, they can't get it right in terms of women and raped women and abused women and exploited women. And we can't get it right when it comes to racial justice ultimately, right? But having said that, I would rather take my chances with a rickety system like a justice system, where at least you have countervailing evidence. Like you said, Jelani said this. Really? Jelani, do you have anything to say? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I do, because I did not do what you said I did. Okay, let's have some argument then, even though it's formalized and often the catechism of jurisprudence distances us from the truth, and it's only what you can prove in court. So we know it's all that funky stuff going on, but it's a process. And I think with cancel culture, the problem I have with so much of it, and I argue in the book that it's white supremacy by other means. What I mean by that, the very nature of Black people's existence, without trying to essentialize us, has been about creativity and construction of opportunity. And yes, the ethic of forgiveness, not just in a lunatic fashion, but in a way that has real moral bite. And I think that cancel culture is anything but is everything and the opposite of that. You know, I'm gonna do you away immediately. I'm gonna wipe you out right now. I'm gonna eviscerate you. And there's no spectrum. There's no spectrum between Harvey Weinstein, for instance, and Aziz Ansari. There's no difference between the KKK member and some white person that's pronouncing the news and ended up mispronouncing a word, and people are like clamoring for his job, right? There's got to be some spectrum here where you go like, okay, what you did was whack, all right, and everything, but come on. Or there's no difference between a white person calling a Black person the N-word and Ralph Northam dressing up in blackface. And as the governor, and let me be honest here, the folk called me up in Virginia were saying, Professor Dyson, we're the Black leaders here and we want to get rid of him. What should we do? I said, oh no, there's nothing better than having a white man in power.
Who owes you?
What's that?
Who owes you?
Oh my God, I was going to break it down, but you just broke it all the way down. Right. Who owes you? I was going to say it.
I got heat for that. I got heat for that because when that happened, you know, I was on television and I said, you know, he did this in medical school. It's ridiculous. It's disrespectful. It's racist. Right. I'm concerned about where he is right now.
Right.
You know, and the reason I said that was that I said it took me much longer than it should have to get homophobic hip hop out of my life. Right. Or to grow up, being honest, casually using the F word as an epithet. Like we didn't even know what it meant. It just was what we heard older dudes call people that, you know?
That's right.
Until you grow up as an adult and say, oh wait, you know, this is part of this complex, which is stealing these people's humanity and being able to facilitate the violence, you know, that is perpetuated against this community. So when you grow up and have an analysis, you go like, all right, so my question with Ralph Northam was, where are you now? Now, of course, once Ralph Northam started talking, I stopped asking that question. I was like, well, look, you know, you ain't figured this out. You know?
Right. But what he did, though, but what's interesting, given you what the point of analysis you're making, where are you now? And as you said, who owes you? And I was going to say, ain't nothing better than a white man who's been hobbled by his recognition that he owes you, that like Joe Biden said, I owe you. I mean, that was extraordinary to me. I don't want to cut it there, but I'm like, I ain't never heard no president say Black people, hey, you had my back and I got yours. I don't care what you make of it. You can be skeptical, but ain't no president ever said that directly to Black people. So what's interesting to me is that Ralph Northam went in 10,000 prisoners. He said, oh, I'm gonna restore your rights. You know, disproportionately that was us, right? Black people. I went down in my book. I mean, I looked at about 3 or 4 metrics and I'm saying this dude is like super Black, right? He's like, I'm going to hook Black people up so much. And I said to them, if you deal with a white man who appreciates the forgiveness of Black people, he will do more for you than the next white guy who's like this. I never use blackface. I'm good.
Right.
I don't owe you nothing. I don't feel no special regard for you. And that person that you now kick out of office, Ralph Northam, who could have done you far more good by remaining there, is now replaced by somebody who feels he owes you nothing because he hasn't done the inappropriate racist thing. But I think your analogy there, I think that's extremely important. I hope people don't miss that. We all grow up. We did things we ain't proud of. And we thank God we didn't do them on TV. What about if we had been doing that stuff on a rap record or on a microphone somewhere or on film, or some of these kids who are ball players, like they're young now, 22. We went back and we saw when he was 14, he tweeted something. Now you're going to kill his whole career? Like he doesn't, right. You were wrong. You were racist.
Let me ask one thing though. Let me ask one thing. What do you make of the argument that, you know, the reason that this thing, I tend not to use the term cancel culture, but the reason why we have this moment was because it was a way of getting at people who were institutionally safe. Like the institutions weren't ever going to treat these people.
I get that.
To weaponize and I've seen, you know, my share of things that I think were excessive, like at the New Yorker when there was the controversy over whether or not Steve Bannon would be at the New Yorker Festival. And then all of a sudden there are people on Twitter calling for David Remnick's head. And I was like, wait, do you understand that without David Remnick, Kashif Browder, would not be known? Like David Remnick piece, like the Jennifer Gonnerman did, that sparked that whole...
The whole thing, bro. The whole thing. That led to a Jay-Z documentary. That led to
all of that. That came out of David Remnick's decision making. And so that kind of idea of it was like, okay, this is a problem. At the same time, I think there are people who are immune. This, quite frankly, they move through the world in ways they can't be got at in other ways.
There ain't no doubt about that, but it's for them. My point is, even if it's 100, I'm saying, in other words, that's absolutely right. And that's the legitimacy, right? Well, we got R. Kelly. Oh, we got Harvey Weinstein. Oh, we got Bill Cosby, right? Ain't nobody crying in there. Like, look, whatever, dude, that's what it is. The problem is, most often cancel culture ain't used against them. It's lateral, it's peer driven. And even though people are in their sights, the perception of what constitutes an offense worthy of the nuclear option, the willingness to go to the nuclear option so quickly is astonishing to me. Because for me, that ain't about the Harvey Weinsteins and the Bill Cosbys and the darn, you know, R. Kellys. That's about people you go, well, damn, yeah, they messed up, but like they don't have a job, like they're done, or you know, their career is ended, like over that. Mm-hmm. So that to me, the average use of cancel culture is not against, because very few of those people who can't get got, as you said, institutionally safe, who are immune from some of those happenings. What happened before cancel culture? Some of them might have gotten away, but many of them were eventually, for some other reason, like Al Capone. Oh, we can't get you on this, but we get you on this. Look at OJ. We're not going to get you on murder charges, but we're going to get you for stealing your own stuff and then put you in jail for 10 years, which is absurd, right? Like, what?
I think R. Kelly was never going to get got, but I see your point.
R. Kelly might have, R. Kelly, right. And I'm not denying the legitimacy of it in that case, but to use that as an example for how we should address, Margaret Atwood is right. You can't adjudicate issues of justice on the internet. And just dude.
I think Atwood has probably had the most discerning kind of perspective on this.
Oh yeah.
Her writing, her essays about this have been kind of really interesting parsing of the various kinds of parts of it.
And they killed her. And they killed her for that.
Yeah, I saw that.
And they killed her for that. Right. So I try to make mine smoother.
Can we get another, like, one more question? I know we're like running.
Yeah, no, we got one more here.
Okay.
We've got time for another one. Let's see. This says, so originally this event was supposed to cut off at 8:30, by the way. So if we get cut off in the middle, I just wanted to say that's why, and I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm not sure if they arranged that on the back end, but let's try to get one more in. This is from Hugh. He says, in the description of your book, the publisher states, ending with a poignant plea for hope, Dyson's new book points the way to social redemption. How will we know when we've reached or achieved social redemption? Or asked differently, what will it look like in your eyes?
All right, before we get cut off, social redemption to me is the possibility that all human beings exist in an arena and in a culture where the fundamental respect for their humanity is taken for granted, where nobody has to make special pleas to acknowledge them. And that's one reason that drives cancel culture, the refusal to acknowledge the humanity of some people so that they use what's at hand. literally to try to exercise power, to pull the lever of influence. And I get that. I get the impulse of it. It's just that the consequence is problematic. But social redemption for me is the possibility that we live in an arena, in a culture, and in a time and in a place where the fundamental recognition of our humanity and the reciprocal support for each other as human beings is not encumbered by or tethered to some vicious bigotry that refuses to acknowledge the beauty and the power of who we are as human beings. That's kind of, without us getting cut off, that's what I would say.
I think, I think that's it. I will not sully that response with any comment to follow that.
Yeah.
Dr. Dyson, thank you so much.
Thank you, my man. Thank you. I knew this was going to be great. I'm sorry, this is almost personal for me. Thank you so much for this tremendous opportunity and engagement with me, my man.
And thank you for the work that you've done and that you're doing, and for the community who's already got the book. Great. For those of you who didn't get the book, rush out and get it from Anderson's Bookshop. Post haste. Well, don't rush out and do it. You can do it.
We're closed right now. Yeah.
But, hop on their website and get that book. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you, for being here, and thank you for that amazing discussion. Somebody here said that they could listen to you guys all night, and I feel the same way. So thank you so much for your thoughts and your intellect.
We got to do a book together. We got to do a book together so we can go on the road and do this.
You guys should, actually. I think you should.
Dyson and Cobb, Cobb and Dyson.
To the point where we can go on the road. I'll be happy.
Yeah, right.
I am really hoping that day is soon. But anyways, thank you for being here. Thank you to all of you who came tonight. Like I said earlier, it really is just, we are so grateful for your continued support during this terrible time. And just everybody out there, have a great rest of your night, and please stay well. Stay well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you.